So in this episode of Viral Rewind, we're going to look at the Trood, or Trood, email worm. So here it is on the desktop, and it looks like a setup program based on its icon there. We go into our properties, we find that it's about a 10 kilobyte application. And we get some interesting details in the version history. The file version 6.6.6. Number of the beast, anyone? And it says the description is it's a TCP/IP update program for Microsoft Windows 95 and 98 operating systems. Now this is 98. Second edition here on the Toshiba 2595 CDT we're using. So TCP/IP update, English, original file name, TCP/IP update. So that is the program that was infected with Trood here. It is interesting that it says for the Windows NT operating system, and there's our product version. So, if we go ahead and run it normally, we get the Windows TCP/IP update dialog box here. The system doesn't need an update. Latest version of TCP/IP already present. So it's probably the legitimate TCP/IP update for 95 and 98, but it comes bundled with a nice email worm. Now, I'm going to go ahead and restart the computer here, and while it's doing that, we'll talk about what Trood is doing here. So what it did after we ran it there is it copied itself to the system directory, disguising it as systray.exe. And what it's trying to do is load up on system boot as the system tray. And because of the privileges and services that come with the system tray in Windows, you can't terminate it from the Control-Alt-Delete, and it also uses, I believe, the Windows initialization.ini capabilities to install it over these files, which is evident there. See how it says please wait while setup updates your config files? That's because it also dropped a win init.ini, win initialization config file, and that's what Windows uses to update critical system files, because you can't update them in Windows. That's why it tells you to reboot the machine. So we're going to ignore this PCI Ethernet controller because there's a Wi-Fi card in here that's not set up yet. So by installing that, it now has systray in there, and it's got privileges that allow it to load up so it can't be terminated or anything of that sort, or even written to, so it can't really even get deleted. And supposedly it takes the original systray and creates a .sys file out of it, which then it can reference. So it loads up the email worm first, and then after that is loaded, it then reloads the normal systray. So let's see if we can find that file before we get too far. Now, of course, this means that Trood is running in Windows in the background, and because it's an email worm, it's monitoring for any kind of email activity that you may be doing. So if you're in Outlook, for example, and you send an email to somebody, even if that email doesn't have an attachment with it already, it will intercept it as you are sending it in the outgoing mail and attach itself to the email. So I don't believe it affects the body or the subject or anything like that. It simply attaches itself to the attachment section of any outgoing emails that you send. So it intercepts them again as they go out and basically attaches itself to it. So you're not aware of it attaching itself to the emails until the receiver opens it and sees the attachment. So let's look in the system, see if we can find this systray program that it's using. And page down is not working. Oh, there it is. Or keyboard on this 2595 CDT is a little messed up. Now, I don't know if you can hear, but the computer's cooling fan for the CPU is running, which means there is background activity. And look at this. systray.exe, systray.sys. And you notice this is 10.3 kilobytes. And it has the exact same descriptions as the file on the desktop we just ran. So this is the copy of Trood, or Trood, however it's pronounced, that the Win initialization configuration file installed on reboot. And here is the original system tray as a .sys file, which is what it references. See, system tray applet. So this is the original system tray that it changed to a .sys file. So this gets loaded first in place of the original sys tray, and then this gets loaded after that. So this always ensures that the virus runs. And see, I cannot delete sys tray because it's being used by Windows because of the privileges assigned to it. So you cannot deactivate the worm when it's running. So that is essentially what the worm does in getting onto the system, and also how it spreads via email. So now we're going to look at the payload, which requires us to change the date. And the payload activates any Saturday of any month of any year. So as long as it's a Saturday, we'll see the payload. So I just changed it back to the 9th of this month, so that was a Saturday. And I'll go ahead and restart and let it reload on that new date, and we'll see the payload. So getting back into Windows here, getting loaded up on a Saturday. Once again, we'll ignore that. And again, as Windows is loading, it's loading up that infected sys tray, which of course is the copy of the email worm. And we should see the payload occur here pretty soon. I have to get this camera line right. So here is pretty much two things happening. As you saw, our Office shortcut bar appeared there and then went off the side of the screen. So let me change focus back to, well, no, I don't have to, because here it comes back. So as you see, the one of the payloads going on here is any active window. Trood is moving around on the screen there, and it's just bouncing back and forth. And in certain situations, it will speed up that process. Like when I try to bring my mouse near it, it kind of tries to speed it away from the cursor. And away it goes. So I'll change focus back to this window. And what's interesting about Trood here on the payload is because, see, this laptop has an infrared communications port for sending and receiving data wirelessly through infrared. And what Trood seems to be doing here is it's trying to send data over the infrared port to another computer that has an infrared port set to receiving. So I don't know if it's trying to send itself over the infrared communications protocol on here, or what exactly it's trying to do. And supposedly I think Trood is also trying to look for any kind of network drives to spread itself onto, which would probably explain why it's trying to use infrared here as a means of spreading itself. So open up other windows, open up my computer, and it's just kind of going away and trying to zip away from the mouse cursor again. Now if you know how to use your keyboard, it's not really going to hurt you doing it this way. Just kind of annoying because the window is going all over the place here. But if you didn't know how to use your computer solely with your keyboard and you tried to just use your mouse, it would be pretty difficult, but even so, it still would not be very usable with the windows acting like this. Scrolling down, scrolling down. Now I should mention the virus is not destructive in any way. It doesn't really overwrite files again, except for what it did with the sys tray there. It's not going to delete your documents or render your computer inoperative. It's really just on your system there to intercept your emails as you send them to help spread. And also, in case of the payload date here, do this business with the Windows and also try to spread itself even further over network, and in the case of the laptop here, infrared communications. And of course, if you change the date back to another day and reload the computer, well, you're not going to get the payload here. You're just going to have the normal email spreading routine going on. I think I can get it to go a little faster. But yeah, that is pretty much it for the Trood or Trood email worm here for Windows.